The story I'm going to tell you today still moves me to this day. Do you know when something happens in your life that is so surreal that it feels like you're living in a movie? Well, that happened to me 3 years ago, the day a three-star general in the U.S. Marine Corps called my parents personally. Imagine the scene. My father answered the phone thinking it was just another telemarketing call, and on the other end a firm voice said, "General Harrison speaking, I need to talk to you about your daughter Sarah." My father literally turned pale. My mother almost fainted when he repeated what he had heard. But for you to understand why that call changed everything, I need to go back a few years and tell you from the beginning. Because this story didn't start with glory, it started with one of the worst nights of my life. My name is Sarah Miller, I'm 33 years old now, and I'm a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. But 10 years ago, I was just a 23-year-old unemployed girl living in my parents' basement in Ohio, constantly reminded of what a disappointment I was to my family. I'll be honest with you, I've always been different from my siblings. While my older brother Marcus graduated with a degree in engineering and landed a job at a big company right away, and my younger sister Jessica was studying medicine at Stanford University, I had dropped out of college in my sophomore year. Not for lack of ability, but because I simply didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Our family had always been very focused on academic achievement. My father, Robert Miller, was an accountant at a respected firm in town. My mother, Linda, was a high school teacher. They had this very traditional view of what success meant: college degree, stable career, marriage, children. Anything outside of that was considered a failure. The dynamics in our household were pretty toxic, to be honest. Marcus was the clear favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. Jessica was the baby of the family, the smartest one, the one who was going to save lives as a doctor. And me? I was the example of what not to do. The final straw came one night in March 2014. I had just been fired from yet another job. I was a cashier at a supermarket, and I made a mistake with the change that resulted in a difference in the cash register. I came home devastated, needing support from my family. Marcus was visiting with his new girlfriend, and Jessica had arrived for spring break weekend. The whole family was gathered in the dining room, and I walked in wanting to talk about what had happened. I remember it like it was yesterday. I sat down at the table and started explaining. "Guys, something happened at work today." Before I could even finish, my father interrupted me with that harsh voice I knew well. "Sarah, please don't tell me you got fired again." When I confirmed it, the silence in the room was deafening. It was then that my mother said something that would forever mark me. "I don't know what to do with you anymore, Sarah. Your brothers are examples of success, and you seem like you're useless." Marcus laughed mockingly and said, "Sarah, you're 23 years old. When are you going to grow up and take on the responsibilities of an adult?" But it was what Jessica said that really broke me. She, whom I had always defended and protected, looked at me with contempt and said, "Honestly, Sarah, you are a disgrace to this family. I feel embarrassed when my friends ask about my brothers, and I have to mention you." My father then uttered the words that changed my life. "Look, Sarah, I'm going to be straight with you. You are useless. Completely useless. You can't hold down a simple job. You didn't finish college. You have no plans for the future. Maybe it's time for you to find another place to live, because we clearly failed to raise you properly." I left the room without saying a word. I went down to my basement where I slept and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a kid. But you know what's interesting about rock bottom moments? Sometimes they give you a clarity you've never had before. That night, alone in the dark, I had an epiphany. I thought, do they think I'm worthless? That I'm useless? I'm going to prove them wrong. But I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me. I turned on my old laptop and started researching. I wanted to find something that would give me purpose, structure, and allow me to prove myself. That's when I came across the U.S. Navy recruiting website. I spent the whole night reading about opportunities in the Navy. I discovered that they not only offered training and education, but also paid for you to study while you served. I read stories of people who went and lost like me and came out with solid careers, purpose in life, and skills they never imagined they had. What caught my attention the most was the area of naval intelligence. I had always been good with computers and data analysis, but I had never found a way to use those skills. The Navy offered specialized training in intelligence analysis, cryptography, and cybersecurity. The next morning, still with red eyes from crying so much, I went downstairs to have breakfast. My family was there, acting like nothing had happened. My father reading the newspaper, my mother making pancakes for Jessica, Marcus playing with his cell phone. I took a deep breath and announced, "I'm enlisting in the Navy." There was total silence. My father slowly put the newspaper down and looked at me as if I had said I was going to become an astronaut. My mother laughed sarcastically and said, "Sarah, you can barely get up early for a regular job, and now you want to join the army?" Marcus was even more cruel. "Sis, you don't even have the discipline to keep your bed made. Soldiers need order, hierarchy, and physical stamina. You'll quit in the first week." But it was Jessica who hurt me the most. "Sarah, please don't embarrass us any further. It's not enough that you're a failure as a civilian. Now you want to fail in the army too." I left home that same day and went straight to the Navy recruiting center. I remember being nervous, but also determined. Sergeant Rodriguez, who was the recruiter, was the first person in a long time who treated me with respect. He listened to me tell my story, without judgment. When I finished, he said something I'll never forget. "Sarah, the Navy doesn't care who you were yesterday. We care who you can become tomorrow. And from what you've told me, you have the potential to go very far." We took all the aptitude tests. To everyone's surprise, including mine, my results were exceptional, especially in the areas of logical reasoning and data analysis. Sergeant Rodriguez was impressed and said, "Sarah, with these results, you can choose practically any specialty you want." The next 2 months were intense. While I waited for my departure date for basic training, I began to prepare myself physically and mentally. I woke up at 5 a.m. to run, I did exercises, and I studied Navy manuals. My family remained skeptical. Every day there was a discouraging comment. My father would say, "Sarah, you can still give up this madness and look for a normal job." My mother would sigh every time she saw me studying and mutter, "What a waste of time." Marcus went so far as to make a bet with his friends about how long I would last. He told everyone that I would quit before I even finished basic training. Jessica was the cruelest of all. A week before I left, she said, "Sarah, when you come back with your tail between your legs, don't expect us to welcome you with open arms. You're just doing this for attention." In September 2014, I shipped out to Great Lakes Naval Station in Illinois for basic training. I'm not going to lie to you. The first few weeks were hell. Waking up at 4:30 a.m., intense physical exercises, constant yelling from the instructors, extreme psychological pressure. But you know what's funny? After years of being humiliated by my own family, the yelling from the instructors didn't faze me as much. I was used to criticism. The difference is that in the Navy, criticism had a purpose: to make me better. Chief Petty Officer Johnson was my lead instructor, a tall, imposing black man who didn't tolerate mediocrity. In the third week, he called me over after a particularly difficult exercise and said, "Miller, you're trying harder than most here. But effort isn't enough. You need to lead. You have leadership potential. Now you need to develop it." The turning point came in the 5th week. We were doing a navigation and tactical analysis exercise, and I solved a problem that other recruits were having trouble with. Not only did I solve it, but I explained the solution to the entire group. Chief Johnson took me aside afterward and said, "Miller, you have a natural talent for strategic analysis. Have you ever thought about specializing in naval intelligence?" That's when it all started to make sense. In the 6th week, I was named leader of my platoon. I, who my family considered useless, was leading 30 other recruits. Halfway through basic training, we were given a phone call home. I excitedly called my parents to tell them how well I was doing. My mother answered, and the first thing she said was, "Oh, Sarah, haven't you given up yet?" When I told her I was leading my platoon and had been recommended for specialized training, she laughed and said, "Sweetheart, that's probably just the beginning. When things get tough, you'll see it's not for you." My dad picked up the phone and said, "Sarah, look, when you get tired of this game, we can talk about you coming home and getting a real job." I hung up the phone feeling more motivated than ever. I thought, if they don't believe me, I'm going to have to prove it to myself. In December 2014, I graduated from basic training. Not only did I graduate, I was second in my class of 200 recruits. I received the Exemplary Leadership Award and was selected for the Advanced Naval Intelligence Program. I invited my family to the graduation ceremony. My dad said he couldn't miss work. My mom said December was exam time at her school. Marcus said he had more important commitments. Jessica didn't even respond to the invitation. I graduated on my own. Well, not completely on my own. Sergeant Rodriguez, who recruited me, was there. He came up to me after the ceremony and said, "Sarah, I've recruited hundreds of people over the years. You're in the 5% who actually changed their lives. Your family doesn't know what a gem you have." In January 2015, I began my naval intelligence training at Dam Neck Naval Base in Virginia. If basic training was tough, this was PhD-level hard. We learned complex data analysis, satellite imagery interpretation, cryptography, threat analysis, geopolitics, foreign languages. It was 12 hours a day of intensive study. But do you know what I discovered? I was really good at it. My brain seemed to be designed for analyzing complex patterns and connections. By March, I was in the top 3 in my class. My lead instructor, Lieutenant Commander Peterson, called me in one day and said, "Seaman Miller, you have an exceptional talent for strategic analysis. I'm recommending you for the officer program. With your performance, you could go far in the Navy." In June 2015, I was promoted to Petty Officer 3rd Class. That may not seem like much to you, but to me it was huge. I had authority, real responsibility, and a salary that was 3 times what I had earned in civilian life. I called home to tell him the news. This time my dad answered, and when I told him about the promotion, he said, "Oh, that's great, Sarah. But you know this is temporary, right? You're going to have to go back to real life eventually." When I explained that I was being considered for the officer program, which would have allowed me to become a Navy officer, he laughed and said, "Sarah, you've always been a dreamer. You should focus on more realistic things." In August 2015, I was accepted into officer candidate school in Newport, Rhode Island. This meant I could become a Navy officer, something only 1% of military personnel achieve. The program was even more intense. In addition to the military training, we took classes in leadership, strategy, management, military ethics, and international law. It was like taking an accelerated military MBA. But I was thriving. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where my intelligence and dedication were recognized and rewarded. There was no favoritism, no family politics, just pure merit. By the 3rd month of the program, I was elected by my peers as the class leader. I, who my family had called useless, was leading future U.S. Navy officers. In October 2015, something happened that changed everything. I was called into the office of Captain Williams, who commanded our officer school. When I walked in, he had a big smile on his face and said, "Candidate Miller, I have some very special news for you." He explained that my performance had caught the attention of very important people in Washington. I had been selected for a special elite officer development program focused on strategic intelligence analysis. But the most unbelievable part came next. He said, "Sarah, you have been personally recommended by Admiral Thompson, Commander of Naval Intelligence Pacific. He wants you to join his team after graduation." Man, I literally started crying right there in front of him. In less than a year, I had gone from being unemployed and considered useless by my family to being recruited by an admiral in the U.S. Navy. In December 2015, I graduated as an ensign, an officer in the U.S. Navy. Once again, I invited my family. This time, my father said, "Sarah, you know we support you, but a trip to Rhode Island is too expensive at the end of the year." My mother said, "Daughter, I'm sure you'll understand. The end-of-year festivities here at home are important too." Marcus and Jessica didn't even respond. Once again, I graduated alone. But this time, I had fellow officers who had become true friends. And Captain Williams made a point of congratulating me personally. "Ensign Miller, in 20 years of commanding this school, I have rarely seen such an impressive transformation. You are an example that determination can overcome any obstacle. In January 2016, I reported for my first real mission to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Yes, Pearl Harbor. Just imagine, I, who 2 years earlier had been unemployed in my parents' basement, was now working at one of the most important military bases in the world. My job was to analyze intelligence for operations in the Pacific. I worked with top-secret data, analyzing threats, patterns of foreign ship movement, and intercepted communications. It was a very high-security job. My direct supervisor was Commander Rodriguez, not the same one who recruited me, just a coincidence of the last name. He told me on my first day, "Ensign Miller, you come with impressive credentials. I expect great things from you." And you know what's even more amazing? I was living up to expectations. My analysis was accurate, my strategic recommendations were being implemented, and I was earning the respect of much more senior officers. In March 2016, I identified a suspicious pattern in naval movements that no one else had noticed. My analysis helped prevent a situation that could have become a serious diplomatic incident. Admiral Thompson, who had already expressed interest in my work, personally called me into his office. He said, "Ensign Miller, your analysis this week was exceptional. You averted what could have been an international crisis. I'm recommending you to the Naval War College." Guys, you need to understand what that means. The Naval War College is where the Navy's top officers get their graduate degrees in military strategy. It's the elite of the elite. I called home, all excited, to tell her about the recognition and the recommendation to the War College. My mother answered, and when I started to explain, she interrupted me. "Sarah, that's great, honey. Look, I can't say much right now because Marcus is here with his fiancée. They're getting married next year, and we're making arrangements." When I insisted on telling her about the importance of what had happened, she sighed and said, "Okay, Sarah, that's a great story you've got. But you know that marriage is a serious thing, right? Maybe it's time for you to think about settling down and finding a husband too." My father picked up the phone and said, "Sarah, these military things are great, but have you thought about your real future? You're not going to stay in this military life forever, are you?" In August 2016, I enrolled at the Naval War College in Newport. It was a military master's program focused on national strategy and leadership. I studied with colonels, commanders, and elite officers from all over the U.S. military, and even allied countries. The classes were taught by generals, admirals, former secretaries of defense, and career diplomats. The intellectual level was stratospheric. And I wasn't just keeping up, I was excelling. My thesis project was on predictive conflict analysis based on digital intelligence patterns. Basically, I developed a method to predict international tensions before they escalate, using big data analytics and artificial intelligence. The project got so much attention that it was classified and implemented by the Pentagon. My advisor, General Harrison, remember that name, told me, "Lieutenant Miller, I had been promoted during the course. Your work is changing how we think about conflict prevention." In May 2017, I graduated from the Naval War College with honors and was immediately promoted to lieutenant commander. At 26, I was one of the youngest officers to achieve that rank. My new assignment was at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. I would work directly with the leadership of the U.S. Navy, analyzing global threats and developing response strategies. I called home to tell her. This time, Jessica, who was visiting, answered. When I told her about the promotion and my work at the Pentagon, she laughed and said, "Sarah, you're exaggerating these stories, aren't you? The Pentagon is where the really important people work." When I insisted that it was true, she said, "Look, even if it is, you know this is just a job, right? Me here saving lives as a doctor. That's what really matters." Working at the Pentagon was surreal. Every day, I walked through the hallways where the most important decisions about American national security were made. My analysis would reach the desks of secretaries of defense, four-star generals, and sometimes even the president himself. In 2018, I developed an analysis system that helped uncover a spy ring that had been operating undetected for years. My work resulted in the arrest of 12 spies and the protection of top-secret information. General Harrison, who now oversaw my department, called me in and said, "Sarah, your work has saved lives and protected national secrets. You are an exemplary officer and deserve special recognition." In 2019, at the age of 28, I was promoted to commander. For your reference, commander is a high rank equivalent to lieutenant colonel in the Army. Officers of this rank command ships, military bases, and major operations. My new position was Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence Analysis. Basically, I oversaw all Navy intelligence analysis for operations in the Pacific and Atlantic. I had a team of 50 analysts under my command, a budget of millions of dollars, and responsibility for decisions that affected national security. When I called home this time, my dad answered and said, "Sarah, that's great, honey. Look, I don't know much about military stuff, but it looks like you're doing well there. Just remember that military life isn't forever, okay? At some point, you're going to have to go home and start a normal life." In 2020, I was selected to lead a top-secret project called Pacific Shield. I can't go into too much detail for national security reasons, but I can tell you that we developed a cyber defense system that protects American military communications in the Pacific. The project was so successful that it caught the attention of the Secretary of the Navy himself. In December 2020, I received the Navy Commendation Medal, one of the highest honors an officer can receive in peacetime. The ceremony was held at the Pentagon itself, with generals and admirals in attendance. The Secretary of the Navy personally pinned the medal to my uniform and said, "Commander Miller, your work represents the best of the American Navy. You are an example of leadership and excellence." After receiving the medal, I tried once again to share my joy with my family. I called home excitedly, wanting to tell them about the award and how my career was blossoming. My mother answered, and when I started to explain about the medal, she interrupted me. "Sarah, look, that's really cool about your medal. But did you know that Jessica was just accepted as chief resident at the hospital? Now that's a real achievement." When I tried to explain the importance of my award, she said, "Daughter, these military things are very complicated. No one here really understands what you do. It's better for you to focus on simpler things." It was at that moment that I made a decision. I was no longer going to try to prove anything to them. I was going to focus on my work and the people who truly value me. In January 2021, something unprecedented happened. I was promoted to lieutenant commander at the age of 30, one of the youngest officers to achieve this rank in the recent history of the Navy. But the most important thing was not the promotion itself. Here's what came next. I was appointed to command the new Advanced Strategic Analysis Division of the Pacific Command. This meant that I was among the 20 most senior officers in the Navy for operations in the Pacific. My analysis went directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the group that advises the U.S. President on military matters. In March 2021, we led an intelligence operation that identified and neutralized a significant threat to national security. Again, I can't go into specific details, but I can say that our work prevented something that could have resulted in the loss of American lives. The operation was so successful that I received a personal invitation to brief the Secretary of Defense himself on our findings. Imagine, I, who had been unemployed and called useless for 7 years, was now briefing the second most powerful man in the U.S. military. After the briefing, the Secretary said to me, "Commander Miller, your work is exemplary. You represent the best our Navy has to offer." It was then that General Harrison, who had followed my career since the Naval War College, made a decision that would change everything. He called me into his office in April 2021 and said, "Sarah, I have been following your career for years. You have exceeded all expectations and become one of our finest officers. But in talking to other commanders, we discovered something interesting about your personal history." He had learned about my family situation. Since I had never had my family present at any important ceremony, some colleagues mentioned it, and eventually the story reached him. The general continued, "Sarah, an officer of your caliber deserves recognition. Not just military recognition, but personal recognition. Your family needs to understand who you have become." General Harrison then proposed something unprecedented, a special recognition ceremony where I would receive the Defense Superior Service Medal, one of the highest military decorations, and be officially recognized as the Navy's Exemplary Officer of the Year. But most importantly, he would personally invite my family. Not an ordinary invitation, but an official call from a 3-star general in the U.S. Navy. He said, "Sarah, I want your family to understand not only who you are today, but what you represent for the security of our country. They need to know that their daughter is a national hero." On a Thursday afternoon in May 2021, General Harrison called my parents' house. My father answered, expecting a regular call, and heard, "Mr. Miller, this is General Harrison, United States Marine Corps. I'm calling about your daughter, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Miller." My father later told me that he almost dropped the phone. He thought I had died or been arrested. He stammered, "Gee, General? Did something happen to Sarah?" The general replied, "Mr. Miller, your daughter, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Miller, is responsible for intelligence analysis that protects millions of American lives. She develops systems that are used in national security operations. We are honoring one of our finest officers." My father later told me that he began to shake. He asked, "General, can you repeat my daughter's rank?" "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Miller, sir. She commands an entire division of analysts and is considered one of the most brilliant minds in the modern Navy." When my father hung up, my mother was in the kitchen and asked who had called. He said, "Linda, sit down. A Marine general just called about Sarah." My mother laughed and said, "Robert, stop joking around. Generals don't care about ordinary families." That's when my father repeated everything the general had said. My mother was shocked. She said, "But Robert, Sarah is our youngest daughter, the one who couldn't hold down a job. How can she be that important?" Marcus was visiting for the weekend with his wife. When my parents told him, his first reaction was complete disbelief. He said, "Guys, you've been tricked. Someone is playing a prank on you. Sarah can't do this." Jessica was in her medical residency, but my parents called her right away. When they told her about the general's call, she said, "Mom, this doesn't make sense. Sarah has always been the loser in the family. There's no way she could be that important." My parents were so confused that they decided to do something they had never done before: research me online. They found military articles mentioning my work, photos of ceremonies where I appeared alongside important officials, mentions in Pentagon reports. My mother called me that night, for the first time in years. When I answered, she said in a shaky voice, "Sarah, my dear, a general called here today." I said, "Yes, Mom. General Harrison asked me if he could invite you to an important ceremony." She was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "Sarah, we didn't know. We didn't understand what you were doing." It was the first time in 7 years that I heard regret in her voice. The ceremony was scheduled for a Friday in June 2021 at the Pentagon. General Harrison insisted that it be a full ceremony, with military honors, a Navy band, and important officials in attendance. My entire family received official invitations with the Navy seal. These were no ordinary invitations. They were official documents from the U.S. Department of Defense. Marcus later told me that he showed the invitation to all his coworkers. He said, "I didn't believe my sister could be that important. I always thought she was just ordinary." Jessica canceled shifts at the hospital so she could come. She later told me, "Sarah, I never thought my big sister could be a national hero. I always saw you as the sister who couldn't find herself." June 18, 2021, was the most important day of my life. My family arrived at the Pentagon in the morning. They went through security, received special VIP visitor badges, and were escorted by officials to the ceremony site. My mother later told me that when she first saw the Pentagon, she thought, "My daughter works here." My daughter, who I called useless, works in the most important building in American defense. The ceremony was held in the Hall of Heroes, a place reserved for the highest honors. There were over 200 people in attendance: generals, admirals, high-ranking officers, congressional representatives, and military journalists. General Harrison opened the ceremony with a speech about me that left my family completely shocked. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to honor one of the most exceptional officers in the modern Navy. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Miller represents all that is best about our naval force: intelligence, dedication, leadership, and patriotism." He continued, "In 7 years of service, Commander Miller developed analytical systems that have saved American lives, prevented international conflict, and strengthened our national security. Her work is used daily by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and has reached the desk of the President of the United States." My mother was in tears. My father's mouth was open. Marcus and Jessica were completely pale. The general said, "Commander Miller is not just an exemplary officer. She is a patriot in the purest sense of the word. Someone who dedicates her life to protecting our country and our values." When my name was called to receive the medal, I walked up to the podium in full uniform with all my decorations. My family had never seen me in official military uniform. General Harrison personally pinned the Defense Superior Service Medal to my chest and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Commander Miller, on behalf of the United States Navy and the American people, thank you for your exceptional service." The band played, everyone clapped, and I saw my family crying in the front rows. When I was handed the microphone for my acceptance speech, I looked directly at my family and said, "7 years ago, someone told me I was worthless, that I was useless, that I was a disgrace to my family. Today, I am receiving one of the highest honors an American service member can receive." I continued, "I want to thank the Navy for giving me the opportunity to prove myself, for teaching me that determination and hard work can overcome any obstacle, and for showing me that sometimes people who underestimate us are just plain wrong." I saw my father hang his head. My mother was sobbing. I ended by saying, "I dedicate this medal to all of you who have been underestimated, who have been called failures, who have been rejected by your own families. You can prove them wrong. You can become more than anyone ever imagined possible." After the official ceremony, there was a reception. My family approached me hesitantly. My father was the first to speak. "Sarah, daughter, we made a terrible mistake." My mother said, crying, "Sarah, forgive us. We didn't understand. We didn't know who you really were." Marcus came up to me and said, "Sarah, I spent years underestimating you. You are the most amazing person I know, and you are my sister." Jessica was the most emotional. "Sarah, I called you a disgrace to the family. But we were the disgrace. You are a hero, and I am so sorry." During the reception, General Harrison approached my family and said, "Mr. Miller, you have an extraordinary daughter. Sarah is respected by generals, admirals, and the highest levels of the American government." My father asked, "General, is my daughter really that important?" The general replied, "Mr. Miller, your daughter is one of the 50 most important people in the U.S. Navy. Her work protects our country every day. You should be incredibly proud." My mother said, "General, we didn't support Sarah at first. We thought she was making a mistake." The general looked at her seriously and said, "Ms. Miller, it was your mistake. Sarah found her purpose and became exceptional despite the lack of family support. That makes her accomplishments all the more impressive." That night, my family and I had dinner together for the first time in years. The conversation was difficult, but necessary. My father said, "Sarah, I want you to know that I regret every cruel word I said. You proved me completely wrong." My mother added, "Daughter, when you left home to enlist, I thought you were running away from reality. Now I understand that you were racing toward your destiny." Marcus said, "Sarah, I made a bet about when you would quit the Navy. I lost because you didn't just stay, you became a leader." Jessica was even more blunt. "Sarah, I told you that you were a disgrace to the family. Today I discovered that you are the greatest pride our family could have." From that day on, our family relationship changed completely. My parents started calling me regularly, interested in my work and my life. Marcus invited me to be the godmother of his son. Jessica started introducing me to her colleagues as my hero sister in the Navy. But do you know what the most significant change was? I stopped seeking their approval. The ceremony wasn't to prove anything. It was simply an acknowledgement of who I had already become. During dinner, I told them, I don't need you to believe in me anymore. I already believe in myself. But I'm glad that now you can see who I really am. Today, 3 years after the ceremony, I am a Navy captain, the highest rank a career officer can achieve. I command an entire naval base and oversee operations that affect the safety of millions of people. My family now treats me with the respect I have always deserved. But more importantly, they have learned a valuable lesson about underestimating people. My father often tells his friends, my daughter is a Navy captain. She protects our country. And I almost discouraged her from pursuing that path. My mother volunteered for organizations that support military families. She says, I want to make up for the years I didn't support my own military daughter. The lesson I've learned from this journey is simple. Never let the opinions of others, even your family, determine who you can become. Sometimes, the people who should believe in you the most are the ones who underestimate you the most. When my family called me worthless, I could have accepted that version of myself. But I chose to prove them wrong. Not for them, for me. The Navy gave me structure, purpose, and the opportunity to discover my true potential. But the determination to change my life came from within. When I look back now, I don't feel angry at my family. I feel grateful. If they had supported me from the beginning, I may never have developed the inner strength I needed to get to where I am today. Their rejection forced me to find my own strength. The lack of family support taught me to be self-sufficient. Their cruel comments gave me the motivation to prove them completely wrong. To those of you watching, if anyone in your life, family, friends, or anyone, tells you that you're worthless, or have no potential, remember my story. Sometimes, the people who underestimate us are just revealing their own limitations. They can't see our potential because they're looking through the lens of their own fears and insecurities. General Harrison's phone call to my parents wasn't just an invitation to a ceremony. It was a life lesson about the danger of underestimating the people we love. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone important in your life? How did you deal with it? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if the story touched you in any way. Sometimes, our greatest revenge is simply becoming who we were always capable of being. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are capable of much more than anyone imagines. Sometimes even more than you imagine yourself. See you in the next video.